Snap. We're back with their Marvel Snap video, as today we're doing something a little bit different, as we're gonna be talking about the state of the metagame, the problem cards, the solutions, all that stuff. There's been a lot of discussion running around lately within the community, and I thought I'd give you guys my objective perspective, not emotional, because I know I can get pretty tilted and I can just start, you know, rambling and yabbling about it. So I'm gonna try to be objective and concise and explain concise. I'm gonna try. But I would have a video in which essentially I talk about the current state of the game, regarding balance and the meta itself, and try to you know, shed some light on some of these problems and give you guys my perspective, essentially. Before anything, right, I'm acknowledging you, Timmy. I know, I understand the whole argument. I was like, well, every single card game metagame is gonna have something people complain about. Like, yes, you're right. Without a doubt, every time there's a new meta, eventually as things get solved and it all settles down, some decks rise to the top and they outperform others, and thus things get a little bit stale and we wait onto the balance patch to move on to something new. We are never gonna escape from this cycle. But believe it or not, there are better and worse metas. I'd argue that right now we are in a better position than we have been in the past. I was not a fan of the leader meta because while I don't feel like that one was nearly as oppressive as the last two we've been in, I do think that a metagame that revolves around the combination of leech and leader leads to just very boring, monotonous games. With Zabu, kind of like the opposite happened, right? We had this environment in which there was just this broken deck that just did a bunch of crazy things. It was really fun to play because you had more stuff to do in a 6-turn game, but it was that alongside the Silver Surfer deck really outshone everything else. And now we're in a situation in which Thanos is king. Thanos rules over all, and then we have Shuri, Taskmaster, big boy stuff that is also just completely outmuscling everything when we analyze things purely from a proactive standpoint, forcing people to run specific tech cards, which the game does have a limited amount of. And that's also something that I want to be talking about today. This video is not scripted, so I may get a little bit rambly, but I'm going to try to do my very best to keep straight to the point and, you know, be concise about my opinions and stuff. I'm probably going to fail miserably, but I'm going to try. God damn it. So let's talk about some of the problem cards, and I have some cards piled up here because I think it's gonna help my narrative a little bit and keeping things in order. But essentially, we all know the card that people are complaining about the most, rightfully so. But like I said, I want to try to you know, shed some light on the issue. I think the problem is not as straightforward as it seems, right? What are some of the cards that people have complained about a lot recently? Well, I'd argue Arrow has been one of the cards that have been complained about the most, as she has a very powerful ability in a game that revolves around 3 locations. Being able to allocate your opponent's play in a turn into a specific location is naturally an incredibly powerful effect that allows players who have taken a lead over the opponent to keep things that way. Right now, there is potential counterplay to Arrow. It does exist, but it's not as prevalent and it's not as easy to achieve for decks as it should be. And one of the downsides as well is that her moving ability is completely random, which I think is absolutely unnecessary. I think Marvel Snap, people confuse Marvel Snap for like a purely casual RNG game, when in reality it is extremely competitive, in my opinion, especially with the friendly battle mode. And I think the Marvel Snap tournament scene has tremendous potential, like more potential than I think I've ever seen in a card game regarding esports. Like, I will say this, I think the potential for there is just absolutely mind-blowing, and that we're only getting started. And I think random effects like Arrow and Magneto should not exist. They should be sequenced in play order so that we have the ability to play around it. It doesn't hurt the experience at all, and it will only make the games better. So that is obviously something that we can all agree on. Arrow should move things in order of playing, right? But on top of that, you could argue that her power is definitely too high and that she's just way too efficient. And right now, the meta does kind of roll around her. There's a lot of things that Arrow keeps in check. And I really like her personally because she keeps more straightforward, proactive tactics like those revolving around Shuri in line. Which is important, but I would like to see more effects like Arrow. I think two very healthy designs around Arrow, or not around Arrow, like two healthy Arrow-like designs that I love in the game are the likes of Magneto. Magneto is, in my opinion, one of the best design cards in Marvel Snap. I think it is very fitting to the character, the fact that he can only move a select type of cards, like, you know, his kinesis revolves around metal, right? It's not like a Jean Grey or Professor X, so he is limited in what he can move, and that is very well translated onto his ability, and his ability just works extremely well because he interacts with the board itself, right? He interacts with what is already there. And there is, you can play around Magneto. You can try to do things here and there. He's just extremely balanced. He's powerful, but not oppressive. And I think he is peak Marvel Snap design and has an Arrow-like effect that is nowhere near as toxic, but still very strong in the right scenario. And then we also have the likes of Juggernaut. Juggernaut is very similar to Arrow, but the downside to Juggernaut is that you are moving cards to another location, which means that you may lock down a lane, but you still have to have secured the other two to a certain extent. Otherwise, Juggernaut will not be enough, right? So I really feel like these two cards are very great examples of what an Arrow-like effect should be, and I do think that Arrow will warrant a nerf eventually, but I don't feel like she's the problem card, like the most problem card in the game right now by far, and I feel like she's actually keeping a lot of stuff in check, and she's kind of a necessary evil in that regard, and I do like playing her personally. But I know that she's frustrating, and eventually, and ultimately, like, she does need to be toned down, without a doubt. She's one of the strongest cards, if not the strongest card in the game individually in a vacuum. Okay, that's one card that people complain a lot about. Then there's Shuri. Shuri is a card that doubles the power of the next card you play. This card with Red Skull leads to tremendous power, and I do think Shuri is a really strong high-end card. And while I have argued that she should be nerfed in the past, I do think that she may actually be quite fine because she does allow for some counterplay. But I do think that with Shuri is one of those things where we should have access to more ways to interact with the opponent. We need more cards like Shang-Chi. We need more cards like Valkyrie. We need more cards like Arrow. We need more ways to disrupt our opponent's plays. I think while Shuri is in its current form is always going to represent some sort of top tier meta deck, I don't think she's nearly as oppressive as other cards at the top have been in the past. So I'm not quite set on Shuri exactly what needs to happen with her, if she needs to be nerfed at all. Like I kind of shift with this card a little bit every now and then, and I think we need a little bit more time to kind of like figure her out. I don't know just how toxic she really is, and I think considering other aspects in the game, she's actually nowhere near as problematic as they are. The deck is kind of boring, you know, like the Shuri Red Skull Taskmaster play is kind of linear, but linear plays need to exist in this game, and there's no need to hate on a strategy just because it's more simple, right? And there's actually a lot of nuance to Shuri, because when you involve stuff like She-Hulk, then things can get a little bit interesting for sure. And Shuri does enable a lot of other archetypes as well, so it is a very powerful effect though, because it doesn't really cap at a specific number, it just doubles. When you have effects like these in a game that revolves around one stat, it is very easy for them to get out of hand. English. So we got to keep this in mind. I put cards here like Galactus because I do feel like Galactus is a very polarizing card. I do think that Galactus may ultimately end up being unhealthy for the game. As fun as he can be to play, I do think he eventually becomes rather boring. And is a card that kind of like warps. The problem with Galactus is like, not necessarily, I'm not talking about power level, I'm just talking about like it being the most polarizing card out there, and the fact that it forces you to play stuff like Arrow so that you don't just automatically lose to it. There are other counterplays, like you can run stuff like Debris, you can play Green Goblin, Daredevil is a great way to try to respond to it, and see it coming, but you need to run some sort of card that can actually disrupt your opponent's location in some sort of sense, like add something there or prevent something from being played there, like Juggernaut, for example, to stop it. I would argue that there are more counters to Galactus in the game that people are willing to admit. We're only gonna get more as the card pool expands, but I do feel like right now, the current state of things, there are answers, but they're not quite enough answers for you to be able to include something relevant in every deck, or at least a good portion of decks, which does make Galactus annoying to run into. There's a lot of cool strategies that he just shuts down, and he does hurt the snap mechanic as well. That's also something that I'm going to be talking about a lot in today's video, because the biggest strength of Marvel Snap is the location system combined with the snap mechanic. The snap mechanic is what really makes the game very competitive. Is where I think a lot of the skill lies, knowing exactly when to snap. And there are some aspects of the game that are completely, honestly, shitting on that, and it's really bad. Like that's like the biggest issue, I'd argue, is I saw a tweet earlier today that really expresses how I feel, and you'll probably be surprised about what I believe to be by far the biggest problematic card in the game. I haven't even mentioned it yet, and we're gonna get there. And you think you know the answer, but it's not what you expect. So we have Galactus here. We have Thanos. Thanos is I gotta get that. Gotta get that hideous rainbow background in Thanos. But yeah, Thanos is a card that has taken the meta by storm. Not the highest problematic card, by the way. I think Thanos is actually one of the more interesting cards. I think it's extremely fun, and I think, you know, the stone, the 6 stones idea and everything. I think Thanos is just absolutely brilliant design. Did he deserve to be buffed? No. People downplaying the buff is surprising to me, because the buff is absolutely relevant. I think this whole idea that you don't ever play, or you rarely play Thanos, is extremely outdated. I think Thanos is a very legit turn 6 play to go for, and a lot of strategies resort to it as a win condition. And buffing his power up to 11 is extremely impactful, and wins a lot of games, and it's a buff that ultimately should not have happened. I think that should be reverted, because I think this is just obscene how high his power can reach. But I do believe that overall Thanos' design is a win. I love the stones. I think he gets a lot of bad rep right now, because the stones do a lot, right? Like, they are extremely flexible. But, you know, and the biggest thing that a lot of people really hate is how the time stone can allow you to ramp into Leech, right? Leech. Oh, this is the biggest problem card of the game. You're thinking, no, we're not there yet, bro. We're not there. We're getting there. Leech is one of the worst things in the meta, without a doubt. Like, it's what people are complaining about the most, and rightfully so. Turn 4 Leech ruins many aspects of the game. Turn 4 Leech kind of like nullifies early snaps, and when you're facing Thanos, you're worried about that time stone into the Leech, or that Lockjaw into the Leech, and that just completely shuts down a game. Pretty much nothing you did prior really matters, as he just removes the essentially all the text in your hand, which is an incredibly powerful effect. I've already tweeted about, I think, what would be the best solution to Leech, which would be to make Leech remove the abilities from all cards in your opponent's hand for the next turn. I believe people need to stop downplaying how important Leech is for the game. We need tech cards like this that shut down crazy combos like Wave into She-Hulk and Death. That is something that this Leech meta is keeping in line, and that is a combo that's one of the strongest things you can do in this game. And the combination of Leech and Arrow is the only thing really holding that back, right? Leech is very important to be able to shut down these sort of strategies that don't do anything and just vomit everything on turn 6, because if that becomes the norm, then the game revolves around one turn, and that really monotonizes the whole experience. So cards like Leech are important, and I do believe that he still needs to be good as a turn 5 play in that regard. There is a price to pay for Leech. You may not want to admit it, but 5 energy, 3 power is extremely low tempo. you can counter Leech by just out-tempoing the hell out of him. One of my favorite things to do when I play, for example, my Daredevil Gamora decks is just Gamora the shit out of a Leech play, and then all of a sudden my opponent's just way too far behind for that effect to have gone by. The problem is when Leech comes in earlier. When it comes in turn 4, and God forbid turn 3, even though some people may argue, well, you're still going to be drawing cards after, but we all know that's bullshit. Like, that play pretty much auto wins, because it is one of the strongest abilities you can have in an on-reveal effect on a card in this game, and for it to come one turn earlier just sets all the balance and rips it to shred. And you may think, well, Thanos is the problem. These stones do too much. You know, Space Stone moves shit around, nullifying stuff like Storm and Spider-Man, and then you have the Time Stone that ramps into him. And you're right, the stones are really, really strong. But the stones, I'd argue, maybe you could do something about the Quinjet interaction for one. But the problem, the reason why Thanos is where it's at right now, the reason why the snap mechanic is at risk of it being like actually balanced, the reason why the game is in the state that it's at, the main culprit is one very, very bad doggo. This is the biggest problem card in Marvel Snap right now, and I'm going to explain to you why. This card, we don't talk about Lockjaw. We do not talk about this fucking dog. I'm sorry, I love dogs, but god damn it, this guy is a massive problem. The number one problem in Marvel Snap, and a problem that's only going to get worse and worse as the card pool expands. You may be thinking, well, Lockjaw's been around for a while. Like, why is it? The reason why Lockjaw has not been as problematic before is because the card pool has been very limited, right? Before Thanos, the way to really work with Lockjaw was running stuff like Wasp and some low card cards, and then going greedy. And you have a deck that has a tremendous high power ceiling that's pretty much unmatched, but is paying for that inconsistency, right? You combine him with Thor, so you can draw the hammer. You have Jane to draw your 0-cost cards on turn 5, and you have a deck that's is fun to play, has a decent power level, but is not really oppressive. Then comes Thanos. And you get a bunch of 1-mana stones with very powerful upon entry effects that cycle themselves, and you combine them with this, right? This is a tremendous effect. After you play a card here, swap it with a card in your deck. If you think about it, the vast majority of problems within this meta revolve around Lockjaw. There is a tweet that I'm gonna read that I really agree with. Okay, it's from Den CCG. He says, I think I found why Thanos Lockjaw is so frustrating comparing to other decks. The RNG surrounding it ruins the snap. The RNG surrounding Lockjaw ruins the snap. If they have Lockjaw, if you think they do, if you are scared they do, you cannot snap, as you have no idea what's next. Deck ruins Marvel Snap's core design, and I completely agree with this statement. This card is what really pushes Thanos over the edge. I understand, well, Leech, how do you think Leech comes out so often? It's not just the Time Stone into Leech play, which we have a solution for, by the way, with that change to Leech. It's also the fact that Lockjaw can pull Leech as early as turn 3. You can have, or even earlier, but you can have a turn 1 Quinjet and then turn 3 Lockjaw into 0 energy stones, and voila, Leech is out. You may argue, well, the Quinjet interaction is also something to be looked at. Maybe. I played a lot of Thanos lately. I played it in this form, in a deck that I really like. It's built by Trekcord. It's called Stab. It's essentially a control version of Thanos. It doesn't run Leech. It doesn't run Lockjaw. It actually just runs the stones in a utility reactive deck, and it's pretty damn solid, but it feels nowhere near as volatile as Lockjaw is. This deck can be pretty damn solid, but it doesn't feel like it's oppressing anything, right? This is why I reached the conclusion that Thanos is actually ultimately fine in design, It's just that right now he's like way too big, right? And maybe some of the stones can be looked at, but I don't really think Thanos is pushed that far over the edge. He's nowhere near what Zabu was. But it's the Lockjaw problem. It's the problem of a card that has a tremendous effect that also turns the game into just this RNG fiesta, because you can put something in there, you can get something like another stone out, or you can get a fucking Magneto, an Arrow, a Devil Dinosaur. Like the amount when this card becomes efficient, when this card becomes effective, and you can actually trigger it early on. When you pair this card with zero cost cards, essentially, is when this card gets completely out of hand. And as we get more and more cards like Thanos in the future, cards that allow us to play these low cost cards that cycle themselves, then Lockjaw is just only gonna get better and better. This card ruins the snap mechanic, because when I'm facing a Lockjaw Thanos deck, I can't, even if I have a solid opener, even if I have a good relationship between my hand and the locations, and I've seen my opponent's first plays in their positioning, I can't ever decide to like snap early, because they could always just Lockjaw into stones and leech me. Lockjaw into stones and just drop something massive, Lockjaw into the space, and you say, well, the space stone allows them to move out of the way. This is the problem. It all revolves around this. And if we refuse to accept this, then we're in denial, right? This is the card that is really hurting. This is the biggest culprit of this meta. Like I said, there's always going to be a culprit in the meta. There's always going to be a downside. I'm not saying, oh, how could this ever have happened, right? Like, it's a card game. Things are going to get out of hand. Interactions are going to happen. As the card pool expands, there are cards with certain powerful effects that are just going to be blown out of proportion. That's why I'm still looking at Shuri. Shuri has a very, like a no cap sort of effect that maybe in the future we get a card that if it has its power doubled, it's just a ridiculous turn 5 that's unbeatable, you know, like that could happen in the future as well. But we're in the present, and in the present, this card is already showing why it's going to represent massive problems in the future. This card needs to be nerfed in a strong fashion so that it is limited to more fringe fun tactics, because I understand Lockjaw is very fun. I understand this card is extremely fun to play. It's the fun card to play, but it does ruin the competitive integrity of Marvel Snap to a strong degree. And while we've had problems in the past with cards being overtuned like Zabu, I think this is a different problem. It's a problem about, you know, a game that a lot of people don't get, that is actually very deep and very competitive. And even though there's a lot of variance in it, it's about adapting to the chaos. But Lockjaw brings too much chaos to the equation and just kind of like flips everything on its head in that sense. So this is the card that needs to be addressed the most. And Leech, I'd argue Leech as well. Leech not necessarily because of how oppressive or how this and that, just because of the fun factor. Leech is not fun to face against, and we also need to balance having the fun factor, keeping the fun factor in mind. Leech is very unfun. It's very unfun to just have your hand completely nullified, and Leech should remain as a turn 5 tech option. You know, Leech coming in early, like this metagame has taught us that ramping into Leech is a very negative experience for the majority of the player base. And there's always going to be some degenerate that absolutely loves this being a thing. but ultimately, we can all agree, at least most of us can, that ramping into Leech is not something that's fun and takes away a lot from the experience and is something that needs to be addressed. I'm not downplaying that at all. But this card is the biggest problem in Marvel Snap right now, even more so than Leech, and it needs to be addressed. And I thought we could, I thought I could try to, I don't know if I've done a good job at essentially explaining my position. I'd like to know what you guys think. But ultimately, this is, you know, the state of the game right now. Like I said, we're at the end of you know, a balance season, however you want to call it, like a balance cycle, and things are more narrowed down. And there's always going to be problems, especially in a game like this. As the card pool expands, there are going to be more and more broken interactions, and you know, it's going to be a thing. But with good balance, fast balance, and with good design, we can have better or worse metas. And I do think that this game has way too much potential for it to be ruined by that, and I don't think the devs will allow it to do so. Like they are reacting to a lot of things, they are changing it up, and they are doing overall a very good job. And you know, and sometimes mistakes happen. I can be very, very harsh sometimes with the way I express myself. You know, I kind of get into it a lot. You know, I'm a passionate dude, and sometimes I have been disrespectful towards the developers for sure, and I do apologize for that because they do a lot of good. They have a brilliant design in their hands, and this is just this game is just amazing. I was actually talking it with like with some people the other day. Like it's such a crazy game. It's addictive because it's good, and we want it to be the best that it can be. And I think it is very important for us to be very vocal about the negative aspects of it, and hoping for fixes to happen, because you know that is card games in the digital era. Everything evolves, everything gets solved faster. So when there is a problematic thing, maybe we're in a meta where nothing is really inherently problematic, right? You know, and that's great. But just, I really dislike this argument of like, there's always gonna be a problem. There's always gonna be something for people to complain about. As if we just need to just suck up and take it when there's something that's not okay. You know, like it really hurts. Like people who take that stance, you know, I'm just glad that they're not listened to. You know, because it's an evolving thing. It's a fluid. It's like a river. You know, I'm getting like all philosophical and shit here, but it's an ever. It's a process that's always in motion, right? So we need to adapt and let the meta, you know, spice up, change, freshen, all that stuff. And I think, you know, I think it was important for me to make a video like this in which I kind of like give you guys my insights as to what I feel is like this is it. Like everything else about the game, like other issues that I think is that there could be more buffs happening across the board. I really like the Spider-Woman buff, and I think there's other cards. I would like more 6-drop flexibility. I think 6 drops could be there could be more viable options between some of them, but that's also something that's going to be improving as the card pool expands as well. Like it's not as bad as it seems. And yeah, we could use some more buffs though, because there are a lot of underplayed cards in Snap, and that is also something that they could address over time, you know. And but I feel like these are the issue is more pressing, and that's where I'm gonna leave up this ramble at. Let's keep it under 30 minutes. So let me know what you guys think about this this mini balanced podcast by your boy. With the IQ shirt and the beanie. It looks like a douche. But yeah, I love you. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. We'll be back at it tomorrow.